Have you ever walked away from a conversation, knowing you said everything you wanted, yet still feeling like you somehow lost? That tightness in your throat, as if every sentence you uttered only drained your strength, instead of proving your point? Maybe you're constantly surrounded by people who speak louder, interrupt, mock, and dominate rooms with arrogance disguised as confidence. And deep down, perhaps you've been led to believe that staying quiet is a sign of defeat, that not defending yourself means surrender, that not reacting means losing. But what if that belief is an illusion? What if real power has never lived in words, but in their absence? Nietzsche, one of the most misunderstood minds in history, saw something few dare to accept. Those who talk too much reveal too much. Those who need to persuade are already at a disadvantage. The world teaches us that every conversation is a battlefield, that we must argue, defend, and prove our ideas at all costs. Yet nature suggests a different path, one quieter, deadlier, infinitely wiser. Silence, Nietzsche believed, isn't the absence of sound. It's an overwhelming presence. Silence unsettles. It disorients. It forces others to confront themselves. This message is for those who feel invisible, unheard, dismissed. For those who leave discussions certain that no one truly understood what they meant. For those tired of being the nice one, the easy target, the calm voice others exploit. Maybe you've mistaken your silence for submission, but today, you'll learn that silence can be your greatest weapon. True victory doesn't come from winning an argument. It comes from never needing to enter one. Prepare to see silence differently, not as an absence of response, but as the ultimate response. Together, we'll uncover how nature's wisdom can teach you to master any situation without uttering a single word. Asterisk, why do we feel such an intense urge to reply? To argue, to correct others, and prove that we are right. Deep down, it's because we've been conditioned to believe that truth must always be defended, that silence means letting the other person win. But Nietzsche saw this need to react as a symptom of something much deeper, our fear of appearing weak. And behind that fear hides the ego, fragile, insecure, desperate for validation. The ego cannot stand to be questioned. It mistakes disagreement for attack and turns every conversation into a battlefield. Nietzsche observed that most people don't argue to uncover truth. They argue to gain control. They seek not wisdom but power. They defend their beliefs not because those beliefs are strong, but because they know that if shaken, their entire identity collapses. In this light, argumentation is not a tool of reason, but a shield of insecurity, a frantic attempt to hold on to control. When you feel the need to justify yourself, to explain your position, you've already stepped into the trap. The moment you defend, you've accepted their rules. You've revealed your dependence on approval, your need to be seen, understood, validated. Nietzsche called this herd morality, the mindset of those who live under the expectations of others, who crave being seen as kind, correct, virtuous. But this craving for approval is what keeps you weak. Real strength, he said, comes not from convincing others, but from no longer needing to. It is the ability to hold your ground even while being laughed at, criticized, or rejected. It's the inner calm of someone who is misunderstood yet unshaken. The power Nietzsche described isn't about verbal victories. It's about self-mastery. It's the power to stay still while everyone else loses control. If you truly want to win, you must grasp this. Debate is a performance, and the first person to act has already lost. The reactive mind is enslaved. The observing mind is free. And that freedom, that silent strength, is the beginning of real dominance. Asterisk, so if reacting is a sign of weakness, how can one still exert power? If words expose us, how can we make others feel our strength without saying anything at all? Nietzsche had an answer, and it lives within his concept of the Bermensch, the overman. Nietzsche never wrote for the timid. He wrote for those brave enough to face themselves, to confront their darkness and transform it into strength. The ordinary person, he said, lives chained to conventions, moral rules, and the desperate need for others' approval. But there exists another kind of being, rare, dangerous, truly free. The Bermensch doesn't react to the world. He shapes it in his own image. And often, he does so in complete silence. He doesn't need to win debates. He doesn't play emotional games. He observes, analyzes, and understands. He speaks only when necessary, and more importantly, he knows when not to. Because he understands something the majority never will. Silence itself is a language. This silence doesn't persuade. It imposes presence. It is not empty. It carries authority. It intimidates. It reflects absolute control over oneself. While others shout, he commands respect with nothing more than his stillness. While others explain, he listens, and in doing so, exposes their weaknesses without uttering a word. His silence becomes a wall. Those standing before it grow uneasy, desperate to know what lies behind it. In their anxiety, they reveal too much, lose their composure, and ultimately collapse under their own noise. This kind of silence is not passivity, it's precision. It's strategy. Every word unspoken is a move withheld. Every reaction resisted is power retained. The Bermensch understands that every emotional outburst exposes a flaw. That is why he stays silent, not because he has nothing to say, but because he has nothing to prove. His silence is his strength, and his presence alone speaks louder than words. What makes silence so disturbing to others? Why does a simple lack of reaction provoke such discomfort, even fear? The answer lies deep in human psychology. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is a mirror. And what it reflects for many is unbearable. When you choose not to react, you are not just muting your voice, you are forcing the other person to hear their own. You make them face their words, their contradictions, their insecurity. Most people don't speak to express themselves. They speak to protect themselves. They use words to convince, to control, to hide the emptiness between what they say and who they really are. So when you remain silent, their mask begins to crack. Social psychology has long shown that in moments of confrontation, silence is often perceived as judgment. It doesn't matter if you're simply listening. The speaker begins to feel exposed. They lose control of the narrative. Their brain enters a state of alarm. The amygdala, the center of fear and anxiety, activates. Suddenly, they start projecting their insecurities onto you. Is he judging me? Did she see through me? In this psychological battlefield, silence becomes an invisible blade, cutting where no one can see, but everyone can feel. Nietzsche understood this long before modern science confirmed it. Most people are slaves to their reactions. They act from impulse, speak from vanity, and respond out of fear of being forgotten. The higher spirit, the one who has mastered themselves, stays silent because they know that every word is a weapon surrendered. Every emotional reaction is a confession of weakness. That's why silence terrifies manipulators. Their power depends on your reaction. When you don't respond, they lose control. They panic. They reveal their own insecurity, but silence goes deeper still. It awakens hidden pain, old wounds of rejection, humiliation, and abandonment. Suddenly, the other realizes they are not the center, that their voice doesn't echo the way they expected. And that realization devastates the ego. That's why silence isn't just defense. It's attack, a quiet, devastating strike at the illusion of control. Emotional detachment is not coldness. It's not a lack of care or empathy. It is, rather, the ability to stay centered, to remain yourself, even when the world demands a reaction. Jung described this as individuation, the process of separating your true self from the noise of collective emotion. To become whole, you must first detach. People often confuse detachment with indifference, but the difference is vast. Indifference is a wall. Detachment is a window. When you are detached, you can still feel deeply. You just don't drown in every wave. You observe without absorbing, understand without reacting, and love without losing yourself. This strength doesn't appear overnight. It is forged through disappointment, betrayal, and loss. Each time you survive emotional chaos, you learn a little more about the power of staying still. In the beginning, silence feels like loneliness. But slowly, you realize it's not isolation, it's clarity. The world becomes quieter, and within that quiet, you hear something new, your own voice. Philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius knew this well. Stoicism teaches that peace is not freedom from chaos, but mastery within it. When you detach, you no longer hand your emotions to others like weapons. You keep them, guarded, disciplined, sacred. You stop chasing validation because you no longer need to be seen to exist. And that's when the transformation begins. The opinions that once haunted you begin to fade. The manipulation that once trapped you loses its power. You see the game, and you step outside of it. You become untouchable, not because you resist pain, but because you no longer react to it. Detachment doesn't make you distant, it makes you real. For the first time, your peace no longer depends on external approval. You start to understand that the loudest victories happen in silence, and the strongest form of love is one that doesn't need control. When you stop reacting, you dismantle the structure of manipulation piece by piece. The world, as you once knew it, begins to shift, not because it changes, but because you no longer feed it with your emotional energy. Those who thrived on your reactions, on your anger or need for approval, suddenly find themselves powerless. The truth is, most forms of control are built on response. People learn what buttons to push because you've shown them which ones work. But the moment you step back, the script collapses. The manipulator, who once seemed confident, now stumbles in confusion. Their words fall flat, their charm evaporates. They are not used to silence. It exposes the emptiness behind their performance. Silence becomes your armor, and detachment, your sword. You no longer need to fight because you've left the battlefield. Those who try to provoke you now find themselves shouting into a void. That void is terrifying, not because it's empty, but because it reflects truth. Psychologically, this moment is called the disruption of reinforcement. The manipulator expects your reaction as validation of their control. When it no longer comes, their brain, wired for reward, experiences withdrawal. Their identity, built on domination, starts to fracture. You can see it in their eyes: disbelief, frustration, even desperation. They will try harder at first: guilt, anger, flattery, anything to pull you back into the cycle. But you've seen through it. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. This is the birth of inner freedom, the realization that you never needed to win their approval or their arguments. You simply needed to walk away from the need to participate. Power doesn't vanish. It changes hands. It returns to where it always belonged, to you. And in that quiet space, something beautiful happens. The world doesn't collapse. It just calms down. For the first time, you see clearly that peace isn't something you find through others. It's something you protect within yourself. When the noise fades and you stop living through the eyes of others, something remarkable happens. You meet yourself again. Not the self shaped by expectations, guilt, or fear, but the one that existed before the world told you who you should be. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole, of reuniting the conscious with the unconscious. At first, it feels unsettling. You may experience an emptiness where chaos used to be. The silence that once frightened you now feels endless. But slowly, it transforms from void to vastness. You start noticing things you once ignored: the way your thoughts flow, the rhythm of your breathing, the subtle intuition guiding your choices. You realize that peace isn't the absence of problems, but the presence of self-awareness. In this rebirth, Relationships change too. People who were drawn to your weakness fade away, while those aligned with your truth begin to appear. Energy attracts its reflection. When you are no longer desperate for validation, you stop magnetizing chaos. What once felt like loss becomes liberation. Psychologically, this is a shift from external to internal locus of control. You no longer depend on others to define your worth. You see that your emotions are not commands, but messages, signals to be read, not obeyed. Each moment of stillness becomes a small act of mastery. Philosophers from ancient Greece to modern existentialists all hinted at this moment, the point where the individual stops existing as a product of society and begins existing as a conscious creator. It is both terrifying and sacred. The rebirth of self doesn't come with celebration. It comes quietly, in small realizations, in moments when you choose peace over reaction, understanding over judgment, solitude over noise. It's not the end of your old life. It's the unveiling of your real one. Freedom doesn't always feel light. Sometimes it feels heavy, not because it's a burden, but because it carries responsibility. When you free yourself from external control, you can no longer blame others for your pain, your failures, or your emptiness. You realize that every emotion, every reaction, every outcome now belongs entirely to you. That realization is both empowering and terrifying. Most people prefer the illusion of control to the truth of responsibility. It's easier to say, "They made me angry," than to admit, "I allowed myself to react." But when you understand this distinction, the entire structure of your inner world changes. You stop being a victim of circumstance and become a participant in your own evolution. Carl Jung called this process shadow integration, facing the parts of yourself you once denied, repressed, or blamed on others. You realize that your anger, envy, and fear are not enemies, but teachers. They reveal where you are still trapped by illusions. Every time you confront them without judgment, you reclaim another piece of your power. This is where true maturity begins. You no longer chase validation, nor seek to change others. You begin to see that most conflict is projection, people fighting their own shadows, reflected in you. And instead of reacting, you observe. You understand that silence isn't withdrawal. It's awareness. Philosophically, this is the bridge between freedom and wisdom. Freedom without awareness leads to chaos. Awareness without freedom leads to paralysis. But when the two unite, a deeper kind of strength emerges, calm, grounded, and unwavering. The world around you doesn't stop testing you. Manipulators will still exist, chaos will still rise. But you've changed. You no longer enter the storm to prove your strength. You stand still and let the storm pass. You understand that peace isn't found by escaping the world, but by mastering your response to it. As you grow into this new awareness, silence transforms again. It's no longer a shield or a weapon, it becomes medicine. You start to understand that silence doesn't only protect, it heals. It gives space for emotions to settle, for thoughts to align, for truth to surface without distortion. When you stop filling every pause with noise, something remarkable happens. Your nervous system begins to reset. The body, once addicted to chaos, learns to relax. The constant need to defend, explain, or justify starts to fade. You no longer chase closure through words. You find it in stillness. Modern psychology calls this nervous system regulation, but mystics have known it for centuries. Meditation, prayer, solitude, all are forms of intentional silence. In that state, your mind stops reacting to every external vibration and starts tuning into your inner frequency. You begin to distinguish between what is yours and what is merely echo. Relationships change again, but this time it's gentler. You no longer need to cut people off in anger. Distance happens naturally. The energy mismatch becomes too obvious to ignore. You start gravitating toward those who speak less but mean more. People whose presence feels like peace instead of noise. And then comes a deeper truth. Silence doesn't separate you from others. It reconnects you to everything. Without noise, you begin to sense the rhythm of life itself. The world seems slower, softer, almost sacred. What once looked like emptiness now feels alive. Philosophers like Kierkegaard and mystics like Rumi hinted at this. That stillness is not absence, but divine presence. In silence, you don't lose the world. You rediscover it. The air feels different, conversations feel clearer. And love feels simpler, no longer an exchange of needs, but a shared awareness. Silence becomes a sanctuary, not because it hides you from pain, but because it reveals that pain is temporary, while presence is eternal. Asterisk. Now look at your life and ask yourself, how often have you remained silent out of fear, guilt, or the desire not to disturb? How many times have you let others speak for you, decide for you, or trample over your truth? Enough. Nietzsche would say that living like this is a betrayal of your own existence. Accepting this type of silence is surrender, a domesticated submission. From today on, your silence must change. It must stop being an escape and become an invisible proclamation of authority, a boundary, a declaration of who you are, even if no one understands. Because your presence doesn't need validation. It needs to be lived. And living it requires courage. True silence is not empty. It is presence, mastery, and power. It is the mark of someone who no longer reacts to the world, but shapes it simply by existing. This is the silence of the Bermensch, not the oppressed, not the timid, but the warrior who has already won before the battle begins. A stillness that commands respect because it needs nothing from anyone. This silence is also a shield against manipulation, guilt, and fear. It protects your energy, your focus, your essence. And when you choose to speak, it is decisive, precise, and undeniable. Not loud, but profound. Words, when spoken from this place, can topple empires, not because of volume, but because of truth and presence. Your challenge now is clear. Transform your silence. Stop allowing it to be shaped by fear, by expectation, by herd morality. Let it become a weapon of presence, a source of clarity, a reflection of your mastery over self. Every time you resist the urge to react, you reinforce your power. Every time you observe instead of responding, you deepen your insight. Every time you choose presence over chaos, you step closer to the Bermensch. This is your call. Choose the silence that commands respect. Not for show, not for approval, but for yourself. Because the weak shout, the strong remain silent, and the wise know exactly when to speak. Your journey does not end here, it begins. If this video blew your mind, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to explore more insights like this, don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button. See you next time.